Hello my dear friends and welcome. Today's video is about my second project as a guest designer for Aall Create. It is an art journal page about friends. So I start with this gorgeous stamp set called Filaments and Feathers, number 621 by Bipasha BK. I load my stamping platform with watercolor cardstock, and because some stamps can need a couple of stampings to stamp a perfect impression, I stamp that beautiful parrot in VersaFine Onyx black ink, first on copy paper, and then I ink up again and stamp on my watercolor cardstock. It could stamp perfect the first time, but why take the chance with my watercolor cardstock when it is so easy to stamp the first time on cheap copy paper? So let's color this parrot, and I will use the same colors throughout this video, and for the parrot I use distress inks in mustard seeds that will act as my highlights, along with twisted citron, rustic wilderness and pine needles, my favorite green combo. I add the yellow first, where I think I want highlights, and then I start adding the greens. First I fill in most of the bird in twisted citron, and then I continue by adding the two darker greens at the base of each feather and where I imagine shadows, and I always go back with twisted citron to blend the colors together without harsh lines. Next I stamp the cow from a stamp set called Farmyard Friends number 620 by Bipasha BK, and I stamp the cow the same way as the parrot. To color my cow, I use a combo of distress inks in Rusty Hinge, Vintage Photo, Aged Mahogany and Ground Espresso, and this brown-red combo together with the green combo will be the colors I stick to all the way. I haven't colored a cow before, but I know I want some white in the middle of the face and the red-brown combo coming in from the sides, starting with Rusty Hinge and slowly building up color with the brown Vintage Photo and Aged Mahogany, and I use the darkest Ground Espresso for shadows. Now, I have been doing almost all my projects lately with Aall Create, and I will in the near future, but I will also do my best to balance the content I make with other brands as well. For the nose and mouth on this cow, I brought out my Prima Complexions palette and used the light pink and beige to color in that area. For the horns, I used distress ink in antique linen so they won't look stark white. I know I have used a lot of wood-like paper recently, and here we go again. I used my Tim Holtz and Sissick as embossing folder and my little bottle of water mixed with a few drops of fabric softener. I spray my craft cardstock and run several pieces through my die cutting machine to get that raised wood grain texture. To bring out that texture, I use distress ink in Vintage Photo and blend it in from the sides and over all of those raised grains. Then I blend in the darker Ground Espresso, but not as far as Vintage Photo. And finally, I use Black Soot Archival ink to give the wood-like paper even more depth. Next, I use that first stamp set, Filaments and Feathers, and I stamp the cluster of flowers first on copy paper and then on my watercolor cardstock. Then I bring out Farmyard Friends again and stamp the flowers from that set the same way. I have all of my flowers and they will all be colored with the same color combos, the reddish brown and the green combo. Now I had a few problems with my camera. It isn't unusual, but I just bought more room on it. So I hope I can do better in the future, because I lost most of the videos coloring with the green, and I have just a few examples with the red-brown combo. But I stick to the same colors to make sure to tie the whole project together and color light to dark and back again, petal by petal. I have a background panel measuring 7 by 7 inches of thick and smooth watercolor paper, and I will do some simple and quick smooshing for the background with Distress Oxide inks in Twisted Citron and Rustic Wilderness. I smoosh my ink pads, add water and smoosh the paper just a few times, leaving a lot of white in my background. To step up this smooshed background, I will use Distress Embossing Glaze in Twisted Citron. The glazes are translucent tinted powders that will still show what's behind the glaze. I have a new anti-static powder tool that I bought from Crafty Annie, and it is a brush with anti-static powder in it that make embossing easier. I brush my panel and bring out a stencil called Heapza Hearts, number 134, and an embossing dauber from Ranger. I pour some of the embossing ink on my glass mat and use a sponge to stencil in some hearts randomly, not caring if I get perfect stenciling, and then I cover it all with Twisted Citron embossing glaze and melt with my heat tool and get these shiny translucent green hearts. The next step is to build a wood frame around my background. I have cut the embossed panels into strips and I glue them on with foam tape in case I want to tuck something behind them and build myself a wooden frame. Next I have all of my green and reddish brown flowers, and I have my adorable cow, and I glue the cow flat in the center. For the parrot I colored an extra wing, and I put foam tape behind it and glue it onto the parrot before I glue the whole parrot cheek to cheek with the cow. Next I glue all of the beautiful flowers flat on my wooden frame and sometimes hanging off the frame. There was a butterfly on one of the flower clusters, and I put foam tape behind it and glued the butterfly sitting on the cow's horns. When everything is in place, I cut off the flower parts hanging off the frame and move on to sentiment. For the sentiment, I used the stamp set called Penguin number 604 by Tracy Evans, and I stamped 3 words, you and me, and I stamped them a couple of times so I can choose the words that stamp the best. I cut the words down to tiny little strips, and then I glue them on to one of my wood strips. Then I cut down the wood strip so every little word has a wood frame. I glue down my 3 words next to my friends, and then I bring out my Distress Oxide inks in Twisted Citron and Rustic Wilderness, and I use a small brush to add little dots of green randomly on the white word strips. And now, this Aall and Create mixed media art journaling page is finished. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. Until the next time, happy crafting!